All right, good evening. My name is Ryan Chanel. I'd like to welcome all of you that are joining us through this live stream to Indian Valley Academy. Before we get started with this evening's event, I'd like to make a few introductions and some general comments before I turn it over to our supervisor candidates that we have with us tonight. First, I'd like to thank Lifesize in the Plumas Valley from Genesee Valley Ranch for giving us this technology. It is not only enabling us to host this event tonight, but it is making our life very much easier as we navigate these difficult times during the pandemic. Next, I'd like to introduce our student moderators, Zachary Yolton and Caden Holland, who you can kind of see at the bottom of your screen. Next, I'd like to introduce our two candidates, starting with Mr. Mike Grant. He's a longtime Plumas County resident. He has a history of public service with the Plumas County Sheriff's Department, as well as Plumas County Search and Rescue. Next, over here on my right, your left, we have Mr. Kevin Goss, our incumbent. He is also a longtime Plumas County resident, a businessman, and he is now seeking his third term as the District 2 supervisor. So this evening's program will be split into two parts. The first part will be questions that were drafted by ourselves and shared with the candidates ahead of time to give them some time to work up some comprehensive responses so that we can make the most of this event. The general topics will be the economy, our county budget, the wildfires, communications, specifically with regards to our internet, and the pandemic response. Candidates will have 3 minutes to answer, and after each question, the candidates will receive a 2-minute time to either review or provide additional details. Once we get through that first round, we'll have a roughly 10-minute intermission, and then we'll enter the second part, in which we will be asking the candidates questions from the community that have been curated by our student team in the back that is off the camera. During this time, the response times will be a little bit smaller. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question. If it's asked of them, you can ask candidate specific questions, address a specific question to a specific candidate if you so choose. And then finally, as we close things up, each candidate will be provided 5 minutes to give any closing comments. So without further ado, I will turn it over to my very capable student team and we'll get started. Thank you.
To begin, Mr. Grant, for the California County Global Economic Forecast, Caltrans listed Plumas County as one of the most vulnerable counties for the economic stagnation and population decline in California. What do you see as the biggest contributing factors to the county's population decline and economic stagnation? How do you plan to reverse these negative trends identified in the report?
So population decline in Plumas County simply comes from our deaths are outnumbering our births. That's the biggest problem. According to economists, any declining population will almost certainly lead to economic stagnation. As an example, Plumas County's aging population, those over 65, now outnumber the professional working group that are 25 to 44 years old. This is significant as part of a less than robust economic environment. We need to find ways to get people to stay here and find ways to get people to relocate here. This requires jobs, infrastructures, and even community amenities that make Plumas County an attractive and affordable place to live. Many businesses are looking for employees but can't find suitable or sometimes any applicants. The current population does not seem to be meeting the needs of employers. Sierra Pacific Industries, as an example, hires people weekly and continues to have significant turnover. Maybe more work programs with younger people while younger people are still in school will help with needed job skills and perhaps more opportunities for those folks to stay in our communities. We also need collaboration across public, nonprofit, and private sectors to align workforce development, economic development, and community development goals and needs. We already have local level agencies working on this. One example is the Alliance for Workforce Development. Those folks have been doing some great work. Our Board of Supervisors should endeavor to work more closely with these groups to better meet the needs for jobs and robust economy in Plumas County moving forward. We need to come up with some strategies to create community amenities, more recreational opportunities like trails and other outdoor activities, support entrepreneurship, and improve the quality of jobs in order to attract and retain workers with a wide range of skills and income levels. Community development efforts are very important and should include housing, childcare, healthcare, and perhaps one of the biggest keys for a good economy is broadband access. Broadband will help all workers and residents have a significant effect on low-wage sectors to help them access economic opportunities. Broadband will allow for more telecommuting to work, so residents here really could actually be employed elsewhere. This would keep our population numbers up, and any additional residents would always be adding to the local economy, regardless of where their actual employer may be located. This is such a diverse subject with so many things that should be worked on to come up with a meaningful solution. I believe the only way this will happen is with considerable collaboration between government and the private sector. This would be a challenging but highly worthwhile task to take on should I be elected.
Mr. Goss?
Okay, thank you. Plumas County's economy over the years has been based solely on, way back when, on the mining trend and then logging, moving forward into the 70s, continuing that trend, and blue-collar workers. But they haven't really, as we moved into the internet-based type stuff, Plumas County hasn't kept up. And it's been due to many factors, but one being our infrastructure here, which Mike alluded to is less than perfect, especially here in Indian Valley. And I think trying to go forward with Plumas County, I think is one thing we are doing at the Plumas County level, which we can't take full credit for, but we have a T-bid in the works right now, which is lodging providers that are willing to tax themselves to create a brand for Plumas County to get out on the web and advertise Plumas County in a way that it hasn't been advertised. I mean, we have a website now to attract folks. We have beautiful scenery and recreation. Working with the Trails, Butte County Trails, or Butte Trails Stewardship Program, bringing mountain biking trails and access to our forest is crucial as well, as long as they don't burn up, which I'll talk about that later. That's people getting out. In the town of Greenville, I have the drugstore in the corner there. And during the pandemic, I was fearing that our economy was just going to tank. And I started seeing all of these people just starting to flock to Plumas County, and our tourism numbers, I mean, the boats up on the lake were up almost 500 boats per week of July 4th, which was pretty incredible to see. And I think that we've got all the tools, but yes, working with Alliance Workforce Development and our new county administrator, or not new anymore, Gabriel Heydrich, who is going to be taking on a lot of the economic development type stuff for the county and making those contacts. Like we're going right now, we're putting through with the Ogles grant to beef up or not beef up, but enhance our local parks and recreation areas such as disc golf and make it attractive for folks to come up here and recreate and so on and so forth. But I see our numbers going up. I see our home sales going up, property sales going up. We are getting there. Yes, we do need some infrastructure, and we'll talk about that later, upgrades, but you know, it's definitely working in collaboration with the private sector and making it happen. Thank you.
Okay, it's all good information. I think Plumas County has always had an unemployment rate that runs higher than the state or national averages. A lot of that has to do with the cyclical nature of our job market. We have lots of tourism here, but the tourism really only brings people in the summertime. So a lot of people work in the tourism trade or the woods or mining, don't work in the winter. So if we have some ups and downs, we need to work on having other things for folks to do so that they can have a livelihood throughout the whole year. Again, the broadband stuff is it's crucial. We need to get to the point where everybody has reliable broadband. It's good for them, for their families, it's good for schools, it's good all the way around. That's huge. I think that's been driven home especially clear this year with the COVID-19 issue and everybody having to have Zoom meetings or this event you guys are hosting tonight. We need to, well, the last thing I'll say with that is there's many large companies out there that allow their employees to telecommute to work. The company that we use for our records management system at the sheriff's office has 65 employees. 2 of them work in the headquarters now. Doesn't happen to be here, it happens to be somewhere else. But they've actually hired people all the way across the country, allow them to live in their homes and their community, and pay them a really good wage to be developers or whatever else this company happens to need. Just something we need to push forward and get done here so that we have more opportunity than we have today.
And Kevin?
Oh, well, I get another rebuttal, I guess. I would tend to agree with Grant for sure, or Mike Grant, sorry, on the telecommuting. That's one huge thing that, yeah, I didn't mention in my first go around, but telecommuting, I know about 10 or 15 telecommuters that live here in the Valley. They fortunately have great access to internet. I mean, it's not great, but it is. They make it work. And they work for companies out of the Bay Area, Sacramento, so on and so forth. And so increasing that population, I think is crucial. I think we have also a robust population of, I know it's not as large as our older population, but we do have an up and coming younger population that is moving here and finding some gainful employment, but obviously not as much. Some of those folks are the telecommuters. Some of them are making their own businesses, their own farms, so on and so forth. So there are a mixture of things happening that I think that when we get them all put together, it's going to be a pretty good environment for our economy up here.
Okay. Goss, this is yours. At a recent meeting at the Board of Supervisors, county officials presented a budget that resulted in a $4.5 million deficit. Coupled with a recession, the economic forecast appears bleak. What would you do to either reduce county spending and/or increase revenue to avoid such shortfalls?
Well, I happened to be at that meeting, and yes, every year for the last 7 years since I've been, or 8 that I've been on the Board of Supervisors, we have faced a budget shortfall, and it's no fun to do that. We're not in the good times of the 90s and early 2000s, but we have to deal with what we have, and we brought that, I was on the budget committee, and going through with all the department heads in individual meetings, one at a time, we would ask them to, at the beginning of the meeting that, or before the meeting, that to come prepared to look for 5 to 10% in cuts that you could make without cutting personnel. And then COVID-19, and this is when, because we realized COVID-19 had hit, and we were, kind of struggling to figure out where our economy was going, and we were just, wasn't quite sure. It was a very unknown situation. And we asked department heads to look for those cuts, because we as a Board of Supervisors, I mean, we understand our departments, but I'm not going to be the one that wants to try and make those cuts. And I can do it if we wanted to, but that's not the way I run things. Then we started looking into or seeing our tax roll come back at 4.3% higher than last year. We said, well, wait a second. Maybe this coronavirus crunch thing isn't going to be as bad as we thought. In the back of my head, I was looking towards next year, which I think is going to be the crucial year, and didn't want to take too big of a leap to close our budget, which we just closed on Monday. So we took 2% out of that and increased our revenue, and we also increased our revenue through the fire camp out at the fairgrounds, which was our revenue that was taken away from the High Sierra Music Festival, the fair, and so on and so forth. Also looking for ways to generate more revenue is always a challenge here in Plumas County, because you don't want to overtax the folks, but you also want to be able to provide services for them. Our departments are already running on lean staff and personnel, and so it's really tough to make any kind of cuts. So, but anyway, it's been tough, and we accomplished it. So thank you.
All right, Grant, to you.
Okay, the budget this year has largely been worked out. Tax revenues in a number of areas, like Mr. Goss said, are higher than anticipated, and that's helped to reduce the projected deficit. There are also some opportunities to use CARES Act funding, which came out of the federal COVID relief, if you will, to help plug some more holes. To reduce spending, cuts would need to be made. These cuts would be on top of all the cuts made in previous years. Many county departments have experienced significant reductions in their budgets already, and it will be difficult to continue to offer a reasonable level of county service should they be cut anymore. The budget cuts and necessary public safety will certainly not go unscathed. They are the largest user of the general fund dollars of the county. One thing that I've heard from many people in the community is there already have been too many cuts to the public safety agencies, and there's little sentiment to reduce those services anymore. The bigger problem is not the current budget, but what happens next year and thereafter. If COVID-19 resurges and causes more restrictions at the national and state levels, we need to look at what that's going to do to our local economy. Plans need to be made now for how to deal with this possibility. CARES funding can replace a sizable amount of wages and expenditures the county's already paid out this year. A considerable sum of these reimbursements will be for last year's fiscal costs, which the county already had budgeted and paid for. I would put that savings aside, and this would help with a potential downturn moving forward. Hopefully that would provide a stopgap to help the county's needs. Kind of like what Mr. Goss said about the 2% savings on the tax rate increase. This does not preclude continuing to look forward and planning accordingly. One problem here is Plumas County is in Plumas County, very little work is done on the budget outside of the annual hearings. There's a mid-year review, but that largely is looking backward. Essentially, did we bring in half the revenue and make half the expenditures? And if we did, we're good. We need to be better at looking forward and trying to anticipate problems and take action accordingly. That process would help minimize the impacts a downturn might bring. Unfortunately, we seem to be far more reactive here in Plumas County instead of being proactive like I believe we should. I would certainly work to change that process and attitude.
All right, yes, definitely. Public safety, no cuts in public safety. That is not something that we can afford to do. Not now, not ever. That's what we really worked hard on to, with the new Sheriff Todd Johns to make happen. And going forward, we want to be able to have enough money going forward to, in case there is a deficit that we're going to look forward to, because at mid-year, we are looking forward. We're not just looking backwards. We're looking forward to see where our revenues are at the point of mid-year and our expenditures, and if there's any kind of anomaly, and where are we going to adjust for going forward. And so I think that that's crucial. Just looking towards public health and the CRF funding that's going to be coming in, which we did balance our budget with, which I wasn't too excited about using part of that money to do because I don't like to balance a budget on one-time funds, but we did use $650,000 to plug that hole that was left after we went through the whole budget process. We did not use the PILT money, which is payment in lieu of taxes. That is also one-time funds. Left that alone in case there are any issues at mid-year, which I'm hoping there's not going to be, but we're going to be actually taking a look, not just mid-year, we're going to be getting updates monthly, which I've instituted for this next year, this next fiscal year, to be updated monthly on where we're standing and keep track of everything to the gnats, you know what, and it's crucial that we do that and make sure that department heads are aware of our need to save where we can, cut county travel, cut non-essential things, and make sure we provide the services for the citizens of Plumas County. Thank you.
The rebuttal for you.
Thank you. So absolutely, we need to be looking forward. The the problems we could face down the road because of this COVID pandemic could have a marked impact on what happens here in this county. So always got to keep our heads up and continue to look forward. When I mentioned the CARES funding, that's the same thing that Mr. Goss is talking about, the CRF funds. It's about $1.8 million that ended up being available to Plumas County, considerably more than the $650,000 that he mentioned. So hopefully, if that's all it took to balance the budget this year, then maybe a large portion of the amount that's left would be used to plug any future gaps and be a reserve for the county moving forward with these unknown times coming towards us. I'm glad there was no cuts in public safety. The sheriff's office is quite a bit smaller than it was when I first started working there. It takes us a long time to get to calls. A lot of folks are not happy with those responses, and any further cuts is just going to make that worse. I'm glad that the board and Mr. Goss realizes that, but sometimes things are what they are, and cuts may have to be made in the future. And while we don't like that idea, and I certainly don't like the idea of cutting anything in public safety, it's still something that we should keep on the table and plan and look and see what that is. Because it may be an option, or it may be a requirement down the road that we have to do. And that goes across the board with any of the county agencies. Thank you.
This is to Mr. Grant. California is experiencing one of the most severe fire seasons in recorded history. This year, it hit particularly close to home with the Claremont Bear Fire. Do you think that this is a result of climate change, forest management, and/or both? What would you do to ensure Plumas County communities are not the casualties of these future events?
I thought this was a great question. For me, the largest cause of the Claremont Bear Fire becoming so impactful is just poor forest management. I've been all over the county in response to the fire and found time and again that private managed lands fare way better than the U.S. forest lands, which are largely unmanaged. Currently, Northern California is officially in a drought, but many parts of Southern California are not. Is that directly a result of climate change or not? I'm not sure. I have no idea. I'm sure there's significant arguments either way. I have read that a 500,000 acre fire can emit as many greenhouse gases as 5 large coal-fired electrical generation plants produce in a single year. Also, the smoke produced by California fires this year in a single day could equal the emissions from all cars and trucks in the state for an entire year. Regardless of your feelings on climate change, these are disturbing facts and something that needs to be worked on to minimize the greenhouse gases that are released by fires in the future. Obviously, the way to do that is keep those fires quite a bit small. One thing that's for sure, the drought in Northern California certainly hasn't helped with our fire danger, and it's made it more significant this year. But going back to my first point, I think our forests are poorly managed. When I first moved to Plumas County, a fire of 3,000 acres was considered to be huge. Now, it would be considered a success if extinguished at such a small size. The biggest difference I see is forest management and the lack of removing fuels that these fires, or that cause these fires to be so uncontrollable. I believe we need to make a push for more logging, forest thinning, brush removal, and other ways to reduce the possibility of these devastating fires. CAL FIRE has done considerable work creating their 45-day report. While that report largely addresses fire resiliency in communities, the conclusions are the same. Thinner, better managed forest lands are less susceptible to destructive fires. The science seems clear. If we can't get control of our forest land, we will continue to see these large and devastating fires. It is time the U.S. Forest Service gets put on notice that their policies are a major factor in lives being lost and livelihoods destroyed. While the county has no authority to manage forests, the Board of Supervisors could certainly pressure forest officials to be better stewards of the land and better neighbors who are committed to saving lives and communities.
Thank you. Mr. Goss?
Okay, so long-term goal, yes, we want to manage our forests for sure. Our national forests are definitely overgrown, not taken care of, but that's not going to happen overnight. We need to, and to be honest with you, with these fires that we're just experiencing, with the Clare Bear fires around 300,000 acres plus, those trees that are gonna come off there, we don't have any place to put them. Nobody's gonna take them. Or if somebody does take those trees and we wanna start thinning our forest, where are we gonna put those trees? Because there's no mills, they're already overloaded. But that being said, we wanna look towards biomass and other alternatives to help us rid the forest of all of that. We've got piles of biomass sitting around. I did work with Sierra Institute here in Taylorsville. We did get a biomass fuel plant up and running at the Health and Human Services to help generate heat. It's a drop in the bucket, a little teeny tiny drop in the bucket of getting biofuel out of the forest, but at least it's a good example of what you can see and to come. As far as protecting our communities, and Mike alluded to this earlier, when you see that fire hit those managed forests like Sierra Pacific had and Chai and everybody else, it slowed down tremendously. Greenhorn Ranch is a Firewise community. It never got to Greenhorn Ranch, but guaranteed if it got to Greenhorn Ranch, it would be a low productive burning fire because of all the thinning and everything going around it. Indian Valley currently does not have any Firewise communities. I will work over the next 4 years to get Taylorsville, Crescent Hills, and Greenville on that Firewise community list, and thinning out the forests up above the buffer zone in the WUIs to prevent those catastrophic fires coming down the mountain, like the scare that we had here in Taylorsville with the fire burning up above us, and just waiting and hoping that it doesn't come down and crown out. And the winds were favorable that day and those few days, and it didn't happen. But it's a scary thing. I live out in North Arm, right up against the back of the Moonlight Fire. I can look back up behind my house right now, and after the Moonlight Fire, there was not one bit of logging done after the fire on the Forest Service land. And there's a clear definition of where Sierra Pacific starts and U.S. Forest Service starts or ends. So it's an issue. I don't know what we're going to do with all the product when we get to talking to the Forest Service and making those decisions. Hopefully there's some market out there for all these trees, but there are a lot of trees to deal with, and right now we're just burning them up. So that's not okay either. But I think protecting our communities is first and foremost, and getting those boundaries around the outside of the towns is key.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. I agree this isn't going to happen overnight. The federal government doesn't move anywhere near quick enough. I think one of the great things about county government is it just takes 3 people to get something through. At the federal level, it's much more complicated. As far as there being too many trees to get to the mills, I guess that could be. I know Sierra Pacific has now said they're not going to accept logs from private timber sales, not their own, while they try to salvage some of the timber that was destroyed in the fire. Biomass needs funding. I mean, we had some good biomass things going on in the past. There was a lot of wood chips that left Plumas County, but unfortunately it just doesn't seem to work out from a dollars and cents standpoint. And I know in a project that was worked on just outside of Quincy, the contractor ended up having to pay people to take the chips somewhere else. There was no market to take those chips. So maybe that needs to be subsidized. Maybe that needs some help with the federal government or something, but we need to push forward with that. Firewise Communities is a great thing, but the truth about Greenhorn is it's completely surrounded by SBI land. They are extremely fortunate with that. They have a wonderful setup inside their community as far as the Firewise stuff goes. They really work hard on it. They know they're remote. They know they have to stand on their own. Matter of fact, during this fire early on, Greenhorn was left with the potential of having a fire in Greenhorn within 4 to 6 hours, and they had a whopping 2 fire trucks to help them, plus their own fire department for 139 structures. So they know how to take care of themselves there. And the other thing is I noticed on a number of projects, since I'm almost out of time here, is a lot of the thinning that's been done, they've just been chipping the material and leaving it there on the ground. I think that would be better than not doing anything at all.
All right. Back to you, Mr. Goss.
You bet. So yes, I agree with Mike on the chipping it out and leaving it out in the forest for it to mulch and turn into a healthy forest. And it's definitely an option and not, but you don't get paid for that. So you've got to, you know, it's a non-profitable thing for those loggers out there. But I would say that best thing for us is to get out there and put some pressure on the Forest Service, work with them. We have been working with them. I worked with Forest Service supervisor a few years ago to try and bring down that $120 million Moonlight Fire settlement funds to at least, you know, put some money back into our local area, get some local contractors back to work rehabbing roads out in the Moonlight Fire footprint. And it kind of worked, but it didn't. And I thought it was good. I mean, we met with the Forest Service time after time after time, and it just went nowhere. And the forest supervisor position here, not as of late, but in the past, has been a revolving door of forest supervisors, which does not help, because each person comes up here, you have to teach them, relearn them, and let them know what the issues are, and get them back on board. Or maybe they may not think the same way that the previous one thought, but it'll be a tough road to hoe. But I think that with everything that's going on this year and the past couple of years with catastrophic wildfire, maybe that there will be some movement in the District 5 ranger zone. But I won't put all my stock in those baskets, but we'll see. Hopefully they're watching this debate.
All right. This next question, starting with you, Mr. Goss. Despite filing for bankruptcy in March of 2020, Frontier Communications continues to be the primary internet provider in Plumas County. The majority of the population still doesn't have access to reliable, high-speed internet. What would you do to fix this?
Well, I don't have Frontier. I have Frontier at our store, and I have Digital Path, which is a wireless connectivity, which is okay, but it's not all that great. But Frontier's in bankruptcy. I just got an invitation the other day to be a speaker on the panel down at Sacramento at the CPUC because of my vocal cords ringing out against Frontier during our project in Greenville, where they were going to pull out of, because they were feeling the pinch on the money wise. But I think good conversations will come out of that. We do have hardwire infrastructure laid out across Indian Valley, across Chester. We do not have the capacity, nor do we have the folks to sit there to fix any of these things. Yes, it's not the best. It's hardwired. Things can go wrong, especially in the wintertime when it's snowing. Or raining, or just bad weather. No, it's not the best, but we do have the infrastructure here. And I think that if we can do the reorganization and find out what kind of direction they're looking at going, and maybe I've heard that there's possibility of them selling off some of their infrastructure up in Idaho and stuff like that to private companies. Although I don't know that the private companies are going to want to buy it, because obviously they see that they can't make it. The Frontier couldn't make it, but I would hate to see all this infrastructure here go to waste that Frontier has. I know wireless is another option, like I mentioned with Digital Path. I think that's definitely an option. There is the floating things in space called Starlink that you see the little white things running around in the atmosphere, which is something that I guess is in the works. I don't know a whole lot about it, but it's going to be an internet provider as well, as far as what I understand, and fairly fast to some of these rural communities. But Mike is definitely a little more IT savvy than I, but I tell you, it's infrastructure here. We do have it. I've seen the Palmes family pull a fiber optic cable out to their house to Genesee to back up Mr. Palmes's data for his heart monitoring deal. And so even though he has a lot of money and he put a brand new wire out there, that's great. I think it can be done. It has been reliable. But yes, it's not optimal. But I think that we've got to save the infrastructure that Frontier has to bridge that gap. and hopefully maybe get a different provider in here, or have the CPUC put pressure on Frontier to provide better service. So we'll see what happens on October 7th. I'll be sending out a link so that you can all watch that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to remind you, you can take off your mask if you like. We're having, viewers are having difficulties hearing.
Oh.
It's your choice.
Okay, all right.
I would prefer.
And this is to you now, Mr. Frank.
Thank you. Okay, wireline companies like Frontier are a dying breed. AT&T and Verizon, both huge providers of communication services, announced years ago they will be out of the landline phone business by 2021 and converting to all broadband networks. In the last 12 years, the amount of landline phones just here in Plumas County has dropped from about 22,000 to just over 10,000. That shows a market decline in this type of business. It's just not sustainable in the future. Frontier declared bankruptcy earlier this year, and while they're a major broadband supplier to the north end of the county, it's probable their service will likely suffer more. The technology they use is in the past. It's not very adaptable to the future. The future needs robust broadband, and we as a county need to understand that. It's unlikely that a company like Frontier will be able to answer at least part of the broadband problem unless they have help doing so. There are numerous opportunities for the county to help private sector businesses get grants. ABBA, or the American Broadband Build Out Act, the USDA with their Reconnect Loan and Grant Program, and the FCC Broadband USA High Cost Program, which has $4.5 billion set aside for rural broadband infrastructure, are just a few examples. I've yet to see any effort that's been made by county officials to pursue these funding opportunities. This leaves our communities in the north end of the county vastly underserved when it comes to broadband access. Grants like these have been available for years. Plumas Sierra Telecommunication on the south end of the county has made huge strides in bringing broadband to that area using just exactly this type of funding. The county needs to work with wireless carriers and help them build more sites by creating an environment that helps with their infrastructure needs. Working through these projects could bring funding stream to the county, as well as making it easier for wireless carriers to expand their service. They currently sit on a state level board that has significant authority to direct wireless carriers to add service to certain underserved areas of counties. The problem here is our county isn't moving forward fast enough to make this feasible. If we continue in a status quo posture, the county and the citizens will lose many opportunities to get better broadband connectivity and wireless phone service. I find this unacceptable on many levels, so much so I spoke to my opponent, who was certainly in a position to make some significant changes regarding this, and asked him if he was willing to work on some solutions. This happened during the first forum this year, and I offered to put politics aside and ask him for his commitment to work on these issues because it's what the people want and need. He committed to working together, but never made any effort to do so, despite a few very direct questions on the topic by members of the community. It's, in this situation, time is opportunity lost.
For you.
Well, I too was at those forums and had that same conversation with Mike. And my takeaway from it is obviously a little different, but he is the IT guru for the Sheriff's Department. And not to be mixed up, he is the Sheriff's Department IT. Our county IT department is separate. And he really knows his stuff about IT. And I said, hey, you know, let's work on this together. And that was the last I heard of it. And so to me, that was him to reach to me, and that's what I was looking for. But you know, I'll extend that invitation again. I know he's getting ready to retire, but I would love to work with him on it and see if we can come up with some better solutions and work with. And I think Gabriel is definitely working on some of those grants. We've been heavy into the budget at this particular point, but those are on his back burner along with the Ogles grant and several others. But we can certainly work on those grants together and come up with a solution. I think that we have a pretty good solution put forth up at the Dyer Mountain project on the tower there. It is a tough road to hoe over there. They had a line commission that Mike Grant sat on up there that for whatever reason went defunct or whatever. Anyway, there was issues with a potential homeowner with the line going through there. Mike can probably speak to this better. I asked Todd Johns, our sheriff, to go up and take a look at it and see, because we want to get power up there as soon as we possibly can, so that we can start bringing in revenue from providers up on that tower. And we looked, and the homeowner said, no, not interested. I told Todd to go look at future adjacent properties. We found PG&E was willing and able, and I believe we are still in the negotiations with them, but we'll hopefully have a favorable outcome. Thank you.
Again, back to you, Grant.
Okay, so I don't want to beat on a dead horse, but the conversation earlier this year was something that I can't solve the broadband problem here, being involved in IT or in my position at the sheriff's office. I reached out to Mr. Goss because his position at the board isn't a position or isn't in place to help with that. So why he would think I need to contact him when I said, we need to get together and work on this for the betterment of the county, I'm not really sure. Fiber cable that was run out to the folks in Genesee, super expensive, incredibly expensive to run anyway. If we're going to get anybody to put fiber cable in this county, we're going to have to find them ways to get money and funding to help get that service in. Dyer, I'm not sure why this keeps coming up in the broadband side of things. The problem on Dyer is public safety communications. It has nothing really to do with broadband. While Digital Path has a significant amount of equipment on Dyer Mountain, the problem is the electrical line there is degrading, and we may lose our public safety repeaters. So that's for the sheriff's office, for the ambulance services, and for fire. So there's where the big deal is there. I think Sheriff Johns would differ with your opinion that you told him to go talk to PG&E. He went to go talk to the folks that were the private property owners. When he got rejected by them, he drove to the next piece of property, called our investigative unit, found out who owned it, and within a very short period of time was on the phone with our public liaison with PG&E to try to get something going through there. Problem is, solutions are available, and we need to work on the needed partnerships to pursue the funding and bring viable broadband to the underserved communities of Plumas County. And the two that I see the most in this district is Greenhorn, who ended up with no communications during the fire, and then again, Indian Valley.
Thank you. Mr. Grant, this is you. As we approach the fall flu season, it is reasonable to assume that Plumas County will see an increase in the number of persons testing positive for COVID-19. How should the county respond?
Okay, we need to have a balanced approach. We've got to keep our people safe and at the same time make sure we don't excessively burden our local businesses. They've suffered already way too much in this process. This does not seem everyone is affected by COVID-19 equally. We must protect our high-risk groups and do better to accommodate our lower-risk population in a way that does not unduly restrict their freedom and still follows guidelines imposed by the state and the local and the federal government. The county is fortunate to have some very good people in our public and environmental health department that have done the majority of the county level work on COVID-19. These folks have done some great work, but more can be done from an overall government approach. The Board of Supervisors, again, must look forward and be ready to deal with any changes in policy quickly by staying informed and being a direct part of that process. The California Department of Public Health posted each county's plans for dealing with COVID-19, which included information on who was directly involved in the process, essentially the county's COVID-19 task force, if you will. Interestingly enough, Plumas County did not include anyone from the Board of Supervisors in their policy-making group. The Board of Supervisors certainly were updated on policies developed, but weren't involved with the day-to-day work where those policies were being formed. While supervisors certainly had meetings to deal with revenue streams, there was a conspicuous absence of any Board of Supervisors member taking a hands-on approach to the overall pandemic response. I found this to be in stark contrast to other counties, many of which not only have one supervisor, but two supervisors on their local task forces. I participated in many COVID-19 planning and process meetings and other meetings with county officials where current pandemic issues were discussed. On two different occasions, and this is troubling, when a difficult or touchy subject was brought up, there was a suggestion that the info specific to the issue be kept from the Board of Supervisors. I never took this as those commenting wanted to keep the Board of Supervisors misinformed, but more that they would not understand the problem, thus creating an issue no one wanted to deal with. It says a lot when your own workforce actively keeps information from you, essentially their boss and their employer. Something is very wrong with this picture. I believe the best path forward is the continued good work being done by our local health officials, and also that should include more direct involvement by the Board of Supervisors. I think the residents of Plumas County really deserve nothing less.
Okay, I too want to thank our public health and environmental health departments and the sheriff's office for all of the hard work that they've done and being able to transition into something that was just completely unknown and not having any idea of where we were going to be and what our numbers were going to look like at the beginning, and just basically being scared. And our economical thing, just shutting everybody down in a rural area is just tough. You just can't do it and expect for them to just bounce back right away. Now, going forward, I think we have a great plan in place. With the flu season and the capacity, we're just getting ready to turn into the yellow tier, I guess is what you can call it at the state level, which going into that tier right before flu season, I think is a great thing. And moving forward, we'll be able to have the capacity to test when we need to test and don't test when we don't have to test. And I think that there's going to be plenty of testing available, whether remotely up in Chester, Greenville, Portola, Quincy. That I don't think that'll be an issue. I think our numbers will stay fairly low. I don't think we'll need to do another shutdown like we did before. As far as the COVID-19 task force team, back a few years ago, the grand jury had been after us to get ourselves a county administrator. And prior to that, the Board of Supervisors was handling everything on the ground and managing department heads and so on and so forth. And everybody was clamoring away that we needed a county administrator. Well, that county administrator was our representative and still is our representative on that task force. Yes, there was an issue with some folks other elected officials that didn't quite get along, and I asked Gabriel, I said, do I need to come down and be on that task force and sit in on these meetings, or are you guys working this stuff out? And he said, we are working it out. And I said, well, anytime that you need me to come in there and sit down and be a participating member of the task force, I will have no problem doing that. And so I don't understand why it was said that the Board of Supervisors hasn't been involved, but we are involved. We get regular reports from Andrew, from Gabriel, Andrew, our public health department, and Jerry Sipe, our environmental health department as well. And so I think I'm in the know pretty much about all of our COVID-19 response. It was nice to be able to hand out all the masks and the sanitizer to local businesses so that they can protect their customers that maybe don't have a mask or need to sanitize their hands without creating a burden on them having to buy masks and sanitizer. And that was provided by the state and handed out by Gabriel and Public Health. So I think we're doing great, and we will move forward and keep a close eye on it. Thank you.
Back to you, Mr. Grant.
Sure. So the economics of this is a huge issue. Too many businesses have suffered far too much. We need to make sure we protect them as much as possible, staying within guidelines and help try to keep their businesses robust as they can be. We've done really good here. We've had very low numbers of COVID-19 in comparison to other jurisdictions. That's been really great. I hope that continues. Maybe it's our open air kind of rural environment that's helping with all of that. We're not in a congested area, for sure. When I looked at the fact that the board wasn't involved in the task force and the fact that our county administrator was, I found that many of the other counties had their county administrators or other like positions involved. But because it was so significant for their communities, it was something that we've never seen before. The economic impact was so severe. Most other jurisdictions, the board has chosen to be a direct part of that process instead of the way it is now, it's a little indirect. If that's what Mr. Goss likes to do, that's great. I don't have any problem with that. That's his decision. But if I was the supervisor, I would be much more involved in the day-to-day discussions of what's going on with COVID-19 and what are we going to do with the county. And it's interesting. If Mr. Goss said he asked Gabriel Hydrick, the county administrator, if he needed to be there, my response to that would be, if you ask the question, you already realize there's a problem, and that means you, or somebody should have already been there. Thank you.
All right, back to you, Mr. Goss.
Well, I went back and forth with this, with Gabriel Hydrick and talking to him about the task force and what are we looking at, and our health officer, Dr. Satterfield. And so when the COVID or pandemic event like this comes around, our health officer is the one in charge. He is the one making the decisions. He is the one that is going to be signing off. I didn't want his job to begin with at all. It was a very tough decision-making process for him. Dr. Satterfield came through big time. And I made some very hard decisions to close down businesses and the such. There were some businesses that did not like that. It was understandable. We worked together to find a happy medium, and along with the state and the public health department. And I think that we worked through it just fine. And when the grand jury tells you you need to get a county administrator to start handling the day-to-day tasks, and we need to set more policy and be looking more of a broad picture, bigger picture. It's been kind of hard for a couple of supervisors that have been here on the board for quite some time to jump into that role. And yeah, it was hard to do. And so this was their first test at it, and I think they came through with flying colors, letting their CAO, yes, maybe Mike says we need to be in on the task force, but once we found out there was an issue or there was some kind of an issue, we definitely dealt with it directly, and I think came out looking pretty good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. That concludes the first part of our program. We're going to take a brief intermission, approximately 10 minutes. We hope you all come back and rejoin us. We love the questions that we're getting. During those 10 minutes, we will be adding those and preparing them for the second part of our program. So stay tuned. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We're going to get started. We will still continue to take questions, and we're going to go for approximately 50 minutes. I'll try to keep this limited to just under 8 o'clock or around 8 o'clock. We have printed up some of the questions that we have received so far. So again, keep them coming, and we'll update as we can, and just keep asking questions for about the next hour. Thank you.
Mr. Goss, to start off with you. What is your opinion on commercial cannabis in our area?
Well, commercial cannabis, back in when Prop 64 first was approved, we formed a cannabis working group, which I was the chair of that working group, to analyze the causes and effects and zoning and everything to a possibility of having commercial cannabis in Plumas County. The reason I wanted to be on that is because I believe in fully vetting any kind of issue such as that. We extended invitations out to all the 5 districts for members from the public to attend and be part of the working group. And we received everybody that was pro-cannabis. Nobody that was against cannabis was on the working group or signed up. And so we started our working group to look at and analyze if it was a viable thing, which we weren't sure. And with anything new like that, you also want to vet everything. Towards the end of that process, a group formed that is backing Mike Grant formed and came in and voiced their opinions towards not having cannabis in Plumas County, commercial cannabis, which we listened and definitely took action. And basically when it was all said and done, we heard all of the
folks that were for and against it, and we voted it down. And it was a great process, worked out wonderfully, and I think that any process like that is well worth doing to make sure that everybody in the county is heard, even the ones that that you don't think might want to make that contribution. So it's you represent everybody in this county, and you must listen to everybody. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grant?
Thank you. So my opinion on commercial cannabis in our area is I'm completely against it. I like the policy we have today. No commercial cannabis, 6 plants per household. I don't think that we need to take that any further. I wouldn't take it any further. I would wait, or I may have to change that opinion if state law required us to. Coming from a law enforcement background, I see what marijuana has done with folks. In talking with my counterparts in law enforcement in other counties that have commercial cannabis, the criminal element that comes in with that is something much greater than I think we want to deal with here in Plumas County. And then one other thing, and Kevin mentioned this the other night, that this cannabis committee is backing me. So if they're doing that, Kevin, maybe you can get them in touch with me, because that's the first I've heard. One person on that committee did ask me for a sign, and he put it in his yard, but that's about the extent of that. But if they wanted to support me as a group, I'd be more than happy to have them do that. Thank you.
Yeah. Kevin, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Just that commercial cannabis, I'm sorry about that. My guy was somebody that told me that. So anyway, commercial cannabis, I think, it's not right at this juncture in this county. I would not move it forward in any way. I do like the thing that we have in place now with the 6 plants. It's working well. We have a enforcement agency that goes out and makes sure that people are growing 6 plants and 6 plants only. It doesn't seem to be, the first year that we had that, it was kind of a burden on the sheriff's department, but I think we finally kind of worked out the kinks, and now it's kind of, people understand that don't go over 6 plants because somebody's going to be knocking on your door. So, and that's kind of keeping people below that 6 plants or under, and it's really working well, and I think Mike would agree with that. There could be some tweaks that we can make to it going into the future, but I think our enforcement is good on it.
Thank you. Mr. Grant?
So I think that it needs to stay right where it's at. I don't want to see any changes in our policy at all. I want to make that very clear. The public came out, some parts of the public came out and were quite vocal about having opportunities taken away from them because of the lack of commercial cannabis. And they talked about all kinds of devastation or bad things that are going to happen to them. And I would imagine that some people are still unhappy with the process, but I think we found our stride. We're keeping our community safe. We're allowing people to have cannabis if they want it. I've noticed maybe 10 or 15% of the houses that I've gone to have cannabis growing in them. Everything's fine. They're good members of society. It's what they choose to do. That's completely up to them. I like where we're at, and I'll leave it.
Yeah. Start off with you, Mike. What emphasis is placed on thinking of access to quality healthcare as a community necessity? What partnerships, either existing or planned, do you see that can maintain the country population as is? Understanding that PDH is a separate organization, do you see any benefit in long-term planning to assist vulnerable populations and influence a strategic goal or goals to assist the community overall?
So absolutely, PDH has been doing some yeoman's work on getting better health care for our community. They reached out over into this community. They run a clinic. They now run the ambulance service here. I sit on I'm the vice chair of the Emergency Medical Care Council, so I work with folks from PDH quite a bit. They really making great strides in bringing better health care here. But I don't think we can forget Seneca Hospital and Eastern Plumas Healthcare as well. I think they're a little bit behind where PDH is at, but PDH is a great model. for them to work from. From as far as long-term planning goes, I think, as the question alludes to, the Board of Supervisors has no say or authority over any of our hospital districts, but that doesn't mean the board couldn't work with them closely. One thing I've noticed about our vulnerable populations, we don't have a centralized list of where those folks are. I've noticed that in evacuations. We went to a community just the other day and actually had to call an ambulance from Butte County to get somebody out of there. If that had been a more urgent situation, that would have been a bigger problem for us. But as it worked out just fine. So getting them to assist in the vulnerable populations and then keeping those people safe outside of their healthcare issues, so that if something does happen at their homes, that we as a community, or as the public safety community, maybe I should say, can help them more than we're doing so today. I think I'll leave it there.
All right.
Mr. Goss?
So unfortunately, back in a few years ago, when Indian Valley Hospital finally closed its doors, Eastern Plumas Healthcare did reach out and helped us get a clinic up and running when we most needed it. It was yeoman's work from Eastern Plumas. PDH does amazing work. They are really striving with getting mental health capabilities in their emergency rooms and hospitals. So when folks, and that's working together with our county, Tony Hobson at Behavioral Health, to be able to have a psychiatrist see a possible 5150 patient or somebody in a mental health or behavioral health crisis in the emergency room, see that individual right away and get the process started and medications on board immediately. And so PDH is really stepping up to the plate in that regard, and Eastern Plumas, I think, is coming right along with that as well. As far as our wellness centers in each one of our communities, our wellness centers are really hitting their stride. I know I just watched, I think it was Frontier Communications was actually pulling fiber optic cable to our wellness center in Greenville. They provide for behavioral health therapists to be there once a week or maybe twice a week, and to get those folks signed up and get them the help that they need or just get evaluated, so on and so forth. So they're critical and provide services such as clothing, wash machines, and so on and so forth, computer access. So I think that's working with the community, and we have that. And I think Mike Grant said that, what if we can collaborate with PDH? I'm on the NorCal EMS board, and I work with folks from all over the North State, including Dr. Keppel, who's now on that committee as well. And is that it? I'll just leave it at that.
All right.
Mr. Grant?
I don't really have anything to rebut. I think we both have a little different idea, but of what should happen moving forward. But I'm glad that we both agree that the hospitals in our communities have done wonders for our healthcare, making our healthcare better here in the community, all the way around the county. And we just need to foster that growth with them and make sure that that process continues on. The better healthcare we have here, the better off we're all going to be.
And not much to rebut, but just a few things. Providing healthcare in a rural community is difficult, if not almost impossible sometimes. And our PDH in Eastern Plumas and Seneca have definitely stepped up to the plate and figured it out to the best that they can, finding money and to keep their doors open, and employees and nurses and doctors to staff their centers or their hospitals and their clinics is difficult. I work with it on a daily basis at the drugstore. It's every time you turn around, there's a new doctor showing up that you're not used to talking to. But our e-scribing system, our electronic record system had some glitches and stuff like that, but they've ironed it all out, and they're moving forward. So yeoman's work to the healthcare districts of our county.
Mr. Goss, to start off with you. Can the county calculate how much loss, if any, that can be directly tied to the COVID-19 restrictions on businesses in the county? If so, will they use some of the CARES dollars to give relief to specific departments?
Good question. We're looking to figure out how we're going to quantify those numbers. We haven't quite got there yet, but we are trying to quantify those numbers. And Gabriel Heidrich, along with myself and Sherry Thrall, are looking into how we're going to possibly get some relief to these businesses without, being it a gift of taxpayer dollars to some of these businesses, because you got to be careful when you hand out taxpayer dollars that it's not a gift of public funds. It's a very tricky thing, but we want to provide as much help and relief as we possibly can once we figure out what some of those numbers are. I know just a drop in the bucket was getting the masks and the sanitizer handed out. I think important to that was Todd Johns getting out there and going door to door with the Sheriff's Department and other Sheriff's deputies, talking to the folks along with Andrew Woodruff and talking to the business owners and explaining to them that, we're going to be getting there hopefully sooner than later with a little bit of comfort. There were some businesses that were happy to close the doors maybe for a month or two and that could afford it. But then there were others that were just cash strapped and they either went out of business or bankrupt and they aren't coming back, unfortunately. So we need to identify those numbers, get those numbers, and start plugging it into where we can take those CRF dollars and move them around to the best suit our small business world here in Plumas County.
Over to you, Mr. Grant.
Thank you. So yeah, trying to calculate how much losses directly the businesses have experienced in COVID-19 is going to be extremely difficult. But it's something that needs to be looked at. The CARES or CRF money, I think it could be pushed back over there. I would agree that the gift of public funds is always a big issue. But let's not forget that because the OES at the Sheriff's Office has applied for and been awarded a disaster relief through FEMA for COVID-19. Along with that, it comes individual assistance programs, business programs. So maybe we wouldn't be able to give them CARES money from the county directly. We can certainly help them get possibly some grants and some very low interest loans to help them if their business has been suffering. I think this is something we really need to look at moving forward. Businesses have gone through way too much already. I've already mentioned that earlier tonight. I don't know how much more they can take, and we certainly know as a community, I mean, your first question was about a stagnant and declining economy. The last thing we want to do is have any businesses or any more businesses go away. So we need to look at all options available to us and move forward with the best plan for those folks to keep their businesses in place and productive within the county. Thank you.
Mr. Goss?
Not really to rebut, just that it'll be tough, very tough to calculate that out, and we don't want to lose any more jobs, any more businesses in this community, in this county over the next few months. I know it's going to be tough, especially if our numbers go up over the flu season, but I think monitoring that and like I said, going into the yellow prior to going into the cold and flu season is critical to make sure that we are as healthy as we can be, and just keeping that mask available when needed, and when you don't need it. As of right now, it's like people can hear me. I'm not going to wear it, but it's not a burden to wear a mask, and but it's something I would rather not do, but to keep people safe and keep myself safe, yes, at this particular point, and keep our businesses going. Yes, definitely.
Mr. Grant?
I really don't have that much more to add. I feel like our businesses in the county have gone through too much. They're too important to us here. We need to do everything we can to help them moving forward. We also need to help them with what's going on, with what has happened with them in the past. I think there's some avenues to do that for them. The critical part to me is making sure no more harm comes to them moving forward.
Mr. Goss, a question for you. Will you please give more information on why IB is not already a part of the same fuel reduction program as you described Greenhorn Ranch as already having, which guarantees them a low burning fire? Thank you.
Well, Indian Valley, well, let's go back to Greenhorn. There's a certain amount of funds that are allocated to through the Firewise, it's Title III funds, I believe, and there's a certain amount of funds. And what you want is you want shovel-ready projects. So those Firewise folks will reach out to a community. Maybe they have reached out to Indian Valley in the past, prior to my time, from what I understand. And what it has to be is it has to be a community-based, volunteer, boots on the ground startup. And to get that moving, and to have it be shovel ready, ready to go is when you're going to get that funding. And I want to make that one of my priorities for Indian Valley, is to get those volunteers, get those folks together, and with the Firewise folks, and really put a solid plan forward to where we can get some thinning done and around these communities, and make them as fire resilient as we possibly can. It's not going to be foolproof 100%, but it will definitely help, as we saw with Greenhorn, and using those managed forest lands around this community as well as buffer zones, identifying those buffer zones, so that when we do, if we win, or if we do have another catastrophic wildfire, we can say, hey, Forest Service, these are the lands that we've already identified, and have those maps ready to go to hand to those folks, so that they know if there's a fire where they can slow it down to get to our communities. So it's a whole planning process. It's evacuation routes. It's everything, and it really turns out really nice. You'll get a nice booklet in the mail, and it's to me, I think, can save lives and save homes. Thank you.
Mr. Grant?
Yeah, just a few things with that. Obviously, Greenhorn's done some great work. So is Sloat and Cromberg. Firewise Communities, or the Firewise program, has a number of different funding streams. It seems like more money is available all the time. It's just not the Title III funding. They do a lot of planning work. They do a lot of cleanup work. They do a lot of projects. It's a multifaceted organization. And then, of course, the Sheriff's Office having OES, we have a contract employee who is a fire prevention person for us. She goes around and does evacuation maps and whatnot, and she's pretty much OES's direct link into the Firewise community. She's done some great work. She worked for the Forest Service for years in the fire business and others. She's been extremely proactive in this. I think it probably could start happening if you got her over here and started having her move that process along.
Mr. Grant, a question for you. If elected, you plan on retiring from your current job with the county. One of the biggest concerns for the people of Indian Valley is that you don't live here. How can you assure us that you'll be accessible and here for us?
So I absolutely plan on retiring from the county. As a matter of fact, I plan to retire from the county last December. When we had the change of sheriffs, Sheriff Johns came to me and said, I'm not ready to replace you. Is there any way you can stay on for a few more months? We had some talks about what I can do and what we would do to make a transition within the Sheriff's Office. My job has morphed into something that's very unique, and I agreed to stay on. So I will retire before I take over the position of supervisor, should I be elected. But in any regard, I will retire soon, hopefully. As far as the concerns of Indian Valley, I completely get that. It's a wide district. I've been all over the district. I make myself available to whoever, pretty much whatever they need to have a discussion with me or a talk with me or whatever. Recently, we reached out to folks and held little mini town hall meetings or mini backyard meetings maybe. And that's been extremely revealing to me. Talking with folks in their environment and find out what their concerns and problems are has been extremely helpful with me in this process of trying to become elected supervisor. So I continue to do that. I plan this summer to be here, Greenhorn, Slope, Kronberg, down the canyon, everywhere, when CSD meetings or other things or public or community events were taking place. Obviously, COVID threw a big wrench in that. So once we get over that, I plan on being involved in all of the communities, not just Indian Valley, but I'm also going to be the one that's going to make sure that your voice gets heard if I get elected.
Mr. Goss, do you have anything to say?
Well, kind of substitute Indian Valley for like Greenhorn, Kronberg, and all other areas. I live here. So, no, it's absolutely critical to be out there and in those other communities to hear the voices and hear the concerns. And one of the things that going through this process of COVID-19, through the COVID-19 pandemic and this process is the way that I'm going to start communicating with folks is going to be more of a social media thing, and I'm going to have my own page. I'm going to invite as many members from the outlying areas that aren't here in Indian Valley and the folks from Indian Valley to have kind of a District 2 Concerned Citizens page that folks can go on and I can monitor and watch things come across and be able to address things. And they can post things in a kind of a confrontational way. Some folks are kind of don't want to be direct emails and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the ways, but there's many more. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goss, to start off. Our country is experiencing a time of incredible political polarization. Many are wanting political leaders to bring social and economic stability back to the U.S. How do you plan to represent and unify the county post-election?
Well, so I've served underneath a Democratic president, President Obama, and under a Republican president, Donald Trump. And yet there are a few things on the ground here in Plumas County that changed, but not a whole lot. And I represent all of the folks from District 2 in Plumas County, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent, green, blue, purple, yellow, whatever. It's this job is more on the ground, running our county, and making sure that our taxpayer dollars go the farthest that they possibly can for the citizens of Plumas County, that make sure that they get the money's worth out of all the taxes that are paid into our local economy here. So to make sure that we have people at the building department to sign off permits so that they can build a home, people at the planning department, and all of that. It's managing a business in a sense, although it's a government. It's really, to me, it's it is up there at the national level and state level, kind of polarized a little bit, to say the least. But for here down on the ground, I'm going to be working to bring everybody together, and I think I do that already. As you'll see, my signs are all over the place in folks that are Democrats and Republicans and so on and so forth. And I really enjoy talking to them and hearing what their concerns are. And I think that just alone brings folks together. And it's been an interesting time. But down here on the county level, you want to get things done and keep moving forward. Thank you.
So for sure, the political polarization in this country is kind of, it's really just unprecedented. It's crazy the way things have become. But the nice thing about the local level government like we have here is it really doesn't, political parties really don't come into play that much. It's a nonpartisan office. There's a few other things that are really great. It just takes 3 people to agree to something to get something done at the local level. When you look at the state level and the federal level and the quagmires that are in getting any legislation passed, anything through their governmental bodies, it just doesn't happen because of this polarization. So I think it's a great opportunity here for us to make changes when we need them to be made at our local level. I also feel that, kind of going back to the last question, that reaching out to people and having those one-on-one discussions, not necessarily in a social media aspect, is incredibly important. I think that helps when people can meet you and talk to you and stand in front of you and have a discussion, look them in the eye. I think that helps with a lot of the polarization that we see in other forms of government. Something that I would plan on doing, something that so far, at least I feel in the process of running for supervisor, has been something that's been very rewarding for me, and I'd like to continue on with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Goss, do you have anything to say?
Just, yes, the face-to-face for sure is definitely, you want to look them in the eye. That's definitely part of the aspect of communicating with your constituents. I don't want it to sound like I'm a social media guru guy, but it's definitely getting out there and talking to the folks and meeting them where they live and talking about things that are on their mind and letting them vent about things is definitely a way for them to feel like they're connected to the government structure here in Plumas County, and just let them vent. I think is one of the biggest things that I've seen over the years, and you learn a lot from that because you take that and we'll run back to your office in Quincy and put that down on a piece of paper and refer to it as many times as you possibly can, and it makes you get back down onto the level of your constituents down here and yeah. Try that.
Thank you.
Good.
All right.
I'm good.
Our next question. Just one second. All right. What each candidate will do to support law enforcement and how they plan on not cutting funding with projected budget shortfalls. We'll start with you, Mr. Goss.
Okay, so when Todd Johns was appointed sheriff back in November, and we started having many discussions about things, he had come up with an idea of restructuring the sheriff's department. The structure, he and I talked about really wasn't fitting the needs of the funding and everything else, and it wasn't giving deputies a clear ladder to move up through the ranks and increase their pay scale or their job status or get promoted. And that is going to, from what initial looking at, which we're going to be taking it up in the next week or two, going to save us some money, possibly. Not a huge amount of money, but I will take every step we possibly can to make sure that the law enforcement, public safety is not immune from cuts, but because as Mike alluded to earlier, that sometimes it may come down to a spot or a point where we're going to have to make those cuts, and those are not fun cuts to make. So I want to put as much effort into putting some money aside or putting forethought into saving money and making our sheriff's department as lean as possible, but without giving up public safety. And I think that this plan going forward is a good plan, and it's been vetted several different times. We're going to talk about it with a full board coming up next month. But I'm looking forward to it. We don't want to, I know we've got short response times, but Plumas County has, on a whole, had short response times for quite a while now, and it's unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grant?
Okay, specific to the cutting of the funding, obviously coming from the sheriff's office and working there now, I've seen what the funding cuts have done to us in the past. As far as reorganizing the department, I think Sheriff Johns is on a good path. I think change is good. But from a reorganization standpoint, I've worked for 6 or 7 sheriffs since I've been here. And guess what? Every one of them reorganized the department in the beginning of their term. They all shifted around to be in a way that they felt was going to be best for their operation. So I congratulate him on coming up with a plan. It's quite a bit different than the plans that we've seen in the past. I think there could be some cost savings in there. I don't think those cost savings are going to be very great. It's important to continue, and I keep harping on this, to continue to look forward to make sure that we can address budget shortfalls or potential budget shortfalls long before they happen. I've seen way too many times in this county where we run into a brick wall, we don't have enough money, there's not enough cash on hand, there's all kinds of different budgetary issues, and everybody runs around with their hair on fire and trying to come up with a solution. I think just looking forward, planning, easing any changes that have to be made is probably going to be the best path forward for our public safety in Plumas County.
Anything to add?
I just want to add that, yes, we've had budget shortfalls every year since I've been on the board. That's our initial, it's not really necessarily a budget shortfall, it's our initial take on our budget. And then we start looking, because we are going to have to make cuts, and we make cuts every single year when we do the budget. And yes, it's not optimal, but we do cut, we defer some maintenance costs for buildings through facilities to save money to plug our budget gap. We do several things, but what we don't do is, because most of all of our departments are running slim to nothing right now, and if I were to take away a position from planning or a position from the auditor's office or something like that, we would be not delivering the services that those taxpayer dollars that those taxpayers are putting forth to those taxpayers, and that to me is an absolute shame. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, just a little bit with that. Obviously, I've mentioned this before, public safety in Plumas County is the biggest user of the general fund. So it stands to reason when the general fund balance is hurting, that public safety is going to take a hit. So it's happened every time. It's happened, I can tell you stories, we could talk probably all night long, but the stuff that's happened at the sheriff's office and the impact that's had on response and public safety and whatnot. So again, I just want to focus on, it really takes a lot of looking forward, a lot of making sure the sheriff, Sheriff Johns now, and if someone else becomes a sheriff in the future, is also looking forward at the same time and seeing what trends are occurring, looking at the budget, make sure we can alleviate those budget shortfalls if we have the opportunity to do so before we run into them. Thank you.
All right. Our next question. All right, Kevin. Oh, sorry. Right. This is for both, so we'll start with you, Mr. Grant. Being a county supervisor is a difficult and challenging position to hold. What is your personal motivation for wanting to serve the people of Plumas County?
My motivation, some people question the sanity behind the whole thing, especially in this day and age. I've had a lot of people ask me why in the world you would want to be a county supervisor with COVID. Now we have fires, we have budget problems, the political landscape being what it is. It seems like a crazy thing to get into. But the truth is, there's many things that I've worked on over the years. I see so much inefficiency in government. I see so much conflict between departments. I see that costing the county tons of money. I don't see the board being able to figure those things out because they don't have much firsthand experience. These are all things that happen before they ever get up to the board. The board is somewhat insulated from those things, but I have lived through many of those. There's some of them going on right now. I think a different approach to this could streamline some of those things. I think we could bring the broadband aspect is a big thing, and it's not my IT background, it's the contacts I've made in the industry and the committees I've been put on that could help the county in that regard. So I've always wanted to do that. I actually was offered a job, or at least I was encouraged to apply for a job with FEMA that has to deal with communications, more public safety communications and broadband. much more lucrative than this, but my heart's here in Plumas County. FEMA is a federal agency. There's no way they're gonna let me just stay here and work on things here. So I thought, it's time to either put up or shut up. So I think we need to have some changes. It's not personal against Mr. Goss. It's just a difference of philosophy of the way they think the job should work. That's why I'm running for supervisor.
And
Mr. Goss?
Basically, I've enjoyed being supervisor for the last 8 years, and it has been a joy and an honor and a privilege to serve the residents of District 2 of Plumas County to the best of my ability. And it is truly rewarding when you're able to go through complicated processes and come out on the other end and say, you know what, I've accomplished it for my constituents of District 2 and Plumas County, and we're moving forward. We've got this. We've got so many other things to accomplish in Plumas County, as we've discussed here tonight, and in District 2, that I want to be a part of that. I want to get my hands down and dirty and really take on the broadband situation, as Mike alluded to, and everybody has alluded to here in Indian Valley. The healthcare situation, I really like that question a lot tonight, and I think that just in the back of my mind right now, thinking of different ways that I can communicate and collaborate with PDH and our healthcare members is something I just now would love to do. And it's just been a challenge. It's been fun. I've loved government ever since I was a child in high school, and so getting to be able to do this is kind of my dream, and I love it to death. And I love the residents here that I've been with since 1973, and it's just an honor. Thank you.
all right. That all?
Mr. Grant, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I'm good.
All right.
Just one last question about the CAO, and then we'll go into closing comments.
Okay.
Mr. Goss, this is for you. On previous forums, you agreed that CAO should take on more responsibility, yet in your recent response to Plumas News, you said, I wouldn't change the position at all. Which answers are true? Please explain why the change in your response.
Good. I'll tell you what, we hired our CAO, our CA, it's a county administrator, not a CAO as of yet. And we as a board agreed that because there were several supervisors that were kind of a little bit leery of this, but that we would move him forward at his pace that he would want to move forward at. And so we do constantly ask him, in his performance evaluations and such, that possibly what are you looking for? And I think his training wheels are off. I think he's ready to move. I did say, I guess I wouldn't change the position at all, meaning I wouldn't get rid of the CIO position. Maybe that's the disconnect in that question, but I would definitely want to see moving our CAO or CA up to a CAO and getting those training wheels, I think, are off now, because this is his first budget. And after this, I would imagine that you'll see Gabriel doing a lot more for the county. If I had anything to do with it, yes, definitely going forward, he is going to be an integral part of our economic development. And he's the person out there that's been going after the Ogles grant. I mean, he's already paid for many things, salary over in spades just with Ogles money. It's $400,000 that he went out and grabbed for us to rehab some of our dying parks and rec stuff. And he's finding creative ways to use a lot of the money out there. So he's moving on in a great pace, and his pace is going to be picking up. So thank you.
All right, closing statements. We'll start with you, Mr. Grant.
Okay. I'd like to thank the Indian Valley Academy for hosting this event. Once again, you guys did a great job. Really, really great job. Thanks to my opponent for the spirited discussion, and everybody that's participated with some really very valid questions. I'm glad that they came out the way they did, and they weren't cookie cutters from what we had before. As we previously discussed, 2020 has been a very challenging year, and poses more difficult decisions that will need to be made as we move into the future. Tonight, more than in the past forums, I think Kevin and I were able to show that we present two very different approaches on taking on these challenges. I don't mean to be blunt, but people know me, I'm just that kind of way. And I don't look at it as a bad trait, part of me being honest. And Kevin, you'll get much the same thing as you have for the last 8 years, a nice guy that lives in Indian Valley. Kevin truly is a nice guy, but now more than ever, we need action, not just nice. On the other hand, I'm someone who will take action when it's needed and face problems we have in a direct way. Kevin, as board's chairman, is in a unique position to help the communities he serves in the most important ways. But the truth is, his term as chair is just more opportunities lost. We are no closer to solving our broadband issues. No one has really worked to lessen our exposure to fire. No steps have been taken to help people with the loss of fire insurance. The board, in my opinion, is too distant from the county's COVID-19 decision process, and on, all the things we talked about tonight. Is this what everybody really wants? Is this what you expect from your elected representative? It may be that all these issues can't be solved in a perfect way, but I truly believe they can all get better. Actually, I believe they can get much better. One thing for sure is if someone doesn't stand up and grab the reins and try to move forward, not much is going to happen. Little story here, a little over 8 years ago, Kevin came to me while I was the president of the Sheriff's Employees Association and asked for our group's support in his first election. I asked him why he wanted to become a supervisor, and he told me really only two things then. First, he wanted to give back to the community and asked if I can give him some other ideas outside of the few that he offered. And the second he gave me, and this one really floored me, was that he never had a job that provided health insurance. So now we fast forward and look at where we're at today. If Kevin wins this election and serves to the end of his term, he gets lifetime medical insurance 100% paid for by the county. This potentially will cost the county hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think we need to all ask, has Kevin really given enough back to the community to justify that cost? One of his campaign slogans is that he represents us all. I'm sorry, Kevin, I just don't think that's the case. You've had many opportunities thrown at your feet, but you fail to take advantage of them, even when they would be to your own benefit. You have members of the community that feel ignored. You have made promises and commitments that you fail to keep. That's not the mark of someone who represents us all. What I hope that people watching will all take away from me is that I'm willing to tackle our challenges in a much stronger and a more direct way. I'm ready to bring new ideas to the table and think outside the box, not just go along with the group to make everyone feel better. The people in this district deserve someone who's willing to stand up and face problems and adversity head on. Someone who is not afraid to make a commitment and stands by their word, not just say what you want to hear to get you out of the door. People deserve someone who is approachable and accessible to all, not just to a select few. With all that said, hopefully you can see my approach in taking on the problems the county faces really differ quite greatly from Kevin. I hope that convinces you that I'm the best candidate for supervisor of District 2. I look forward to the opportunity to represent the people of the district with a strong voice, new ideas, and willingness to get the job done. Thank you all for your time.
All right, end us off tonight. Kevin Goss.
Well, first of all, the statement made about the health and care insurance and everything is a completely made up statement and a lie, just so that he can get it out here that because of my third term, yes, I am getting health insurance. He got health insurance just as much as I do. So anyhow, but what is really going to be good is when Mike Grant retires in December, we're going to have enough money to hire actually not one deputy, but 2 deputies with his salary that's going to be taken away from the sheriff's office. But anyhow, that being said, once again, I would formally like to thank the IBA for hosting this virtual town hall meeting debate for Mike Grant and myself. As this debate comes to an end, and I hope that you, the community of Indian Valley, have learned a lot about past, current, and future issues facing our district and this county. I hope you take into consideration that with such a rural location, we candidly need a steady hand with experience at the helm to ensure the future of our small businesses, children, families, and elderly community are at best. I am continuously generating and collaborating with members of District 2 to originate new objectives and goals for the years to come. With my extensive involvement serving as supervisor for the last 7 years, I've been able to develop personal relationships with many community members throughout more than just District 2, but Plumas County as a whole.
Being able to be a resource and a voice for these individuals will help guide our small businesses, families, and residents to see their wishes and goals come to life. Throughout my whole role, I have been able to impact the community in numerous ways along the lines of tackling issues such as Prop 64, increasing the economy, continued involvement with the Sheriff's Department, focusing on preventing fire devastation, ensuring that children have a spectacular educational system, and much more. I know a great deal of information was disseminated tonight. I hope that when you look to vote, that you are look at experience I have gained and the relationships I have developed over the years. These are invaluable. The developmental process is a marathon, not a sprint. I am confident if reelected, I will go the distance with people of District 2. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve as your current representative. Your engagement in this election is crucial and considerably appreciated. I value the voice and opinions of the voters and solemnly vow to help provide for your requests. If anybody has any additional comments or seeking clarification on any of the issues we have spoken about tonight, feel free to contact me anytime. I will have contact information available for you on the internet. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Slide by.